Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All coming to you from Manhattan Beach one more time. We're going to be up in San Luis Obispo like in just a couple of days. But of course, Tesla has its earnings report today, and so I wanted to talk through it. I'm going to start with a quick summary of a few things, but then mostly deal with the transcript of the actual recording of the event itself, because I always find that stuff more interesting. So anyway, a couple of things. They had $1.6 billion in GAAP operating income in quarter two after restructuring and other charges of $0.6 billion. So that would have been 2.2 before that. Net income of 1.5 GAAP, 1.8 billion non-GAAP net income, operating cash flow of 3.6 billion. So that's a good thing. That's a positive compared to quarter one, of course. Free cash flow of 1.3 billion in quarter two, which is again good, and $3.9 billion increase in their cash and investments. Record energy storage deployment of 9.4 gigawatts. We already knew that because when we saw the original report that came out, a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, we saw that previously. And Cybertruck, they have officially confirmed this now. Cybertruck became the best-selling EV pickup in the US in quarter two, so that's excellent. And Optimus began performing tasks autonomously in one of our facilities. They don't specify which one, so again, the assumption would be it's out in Fremont because at that point that's where it's being made, but we don't know that for sure. Let me skip forward a little bit here. Profitability, reduced sexy vehicle ASP is noticed above. Yep. Where is this? Market share, Tesla vehicles by region. So this is actually cool. You can see that their market share is relatively stable. So that's good considering that, there's more and more competition out there. Okay, here we go. Cumulative miles driven with full self-driving and FSD version 12, which I still don't even have. Now, it's possible my car's due at home. I'll find out in a couple weeks. And actually, hopefully I'll just skip over 12.4 and get 12.5 when I get home. That'd be great. But you can see that we've got somewhere around 0.6 billion miles or 600 million miles or so driven on version 12 of the software already, which is great considering that we haven't seen that much done yet. So that's we haven't seen that. It's not been out that long. That's what I'm trying to think of. It's late. I've been doing stuff. Anyway, but you can see the total cumulative has been going up very, very steeply since March when they did the free full self-driving giveaway. Our black Model 3, unfortunately, is just about to run out of the free trial version. We missed a whole month of it because we've been here instead. But anyway, you can see that it's ramping really, really rapidly. And of course, at the same time, you can see that Tesla's AI training capacity ramp through the end of the year. The dotted lines are projected, but you can see they're still working on 90,000. So I think that the original was the equivalent of 100,000 H100s, but they've got 90,000. Elon talks about that a little bit more in the earnings call itself, but I just wanted to touch on a few of these matters because I think it's important. So again, I'm not a stock analyst. I care more about the company than I do about the stock analytics and everything like that. So therefore, I'm going to focus much more on that aspect of it because that's just what I care about. So anyway, let's do the conference call transcript. This is from Shack News. I will leave a link to this, of course, in the description. Big thanks to them because I was driving. I was coming home from lunch with some dear old friends. So hey, Sig and hey, Ken. We had lunch today, and on the way home, I was listening to it on the 405, but of course could not write anything because I had to drive because I was driving a Mazda instead of my Tesla. Man, I have missed that Tesla for the month. I'm going to be so happy to get home and get that. Anyway, so Elon's comments here, we'll start with that. EV discounts have made things more difficult for Tesla, which was a really interesting kind of revelation that was not expected. I think that's partly because of, well, what he said, that there's more competition, but it's also some confusion in the market of, consumers and everything. So anyway, it's a short-term issue according to Elon. He still believes that EVs are the best for customers. I would hope that he would say that because it would make no sense to have an electric vehicle company that only makes EVs and say that it's not best for customers. But anyway, he says it's best for customers. Touts the energy division. That, of course, has garnered a lot of well-deserved praise. They've got another huge contract that they just implemented with some company in California. I'm blanking on the name right now, but anyway, they're growing very, very rapidly, and I believe that was part of their highlight reel. Let me go back and see if I can find. Yeah, energy deployment. Here we go. So you can see that quarter two of 2024. Here we go. They had just blew away all of the other records, and there's a likelihood that that will actually continue over time, it's going to grow in a lumpy fashion. You can see how it like grew a little bit, went down, grew a little bit, went down. So, don't expect it to just keep rocketing up forever because they can't do that. But they've got their manufacturing is ramped really well. They're building another one in China now. And when that gets done, which I believe will be 2026, early 2026, end of 2025, then things are going to really, really ramp up on their energy division. So that sort of helped to stabilize things because the automotive end of their business, which is why their earnings per share was down a little bit from Wall Street expectations. So anyway, that bolsters one or the other. So you've got better in the energy department, worse in the automotive department. The more important part, of course, long term is the AI play, not just with cars, but also with Optimus. And we're going to get to that in a little bit anyway, as we talk through this transcript. Not going to talk about the product roadmap. He was asked that several times in questions, and he was just like, not going to talk about the product roadmap. I don't know why people keep asking, because he's very consistent about that. During earnings calls, they never talk about their product roadmap. So he did, however, say that they're on track to deliver a more affordable model in the first half of next year. So whether that's going to be an exact sort of model that's like the Cybercab, but with steering wheel and pedals, or whether that's a sort of reduced version of the Model Y or something along those lines, which is like the half unboxed product, could be possible. But anyway, Elon specifically said that he didn't want to Osborne themselves. They didn't want to Osborne themselves. So they don't want to talk too much about the specifics of this until it's ready to actually like produce the car and have people purchase it, or else they take a risk of people not purchasing a Model 3 or Model Y in the meantime. So of course, the obvious, statement, which all of us who are paying attention know, is that the big differentiator is autonomy. Tesla is pursuing AI from an autonomous driving and robot way. So they're doing both of those things at once. In my personal opinion, the humanoid robot, now that they've got the ability to make it walk and all of that kind of good stuff, is actually the easier play than full self-driving because it's less critical, right? A robot can stop, it can stand still for a minute and think about things. Cars cannot do that. They always have to be working perfectly. They cannot make mistakes. So that's going to be an interesting aspect, but you can see they're specific about driving and humanoid robot. Both of those avenues are very important. They're both highly, highly interrelated. They've made progress in full self-driving during Q2. I hear from everybody that's driven 12.5 that it's really amazing, including Ashok, who piped in at one point during one of the questions and was talking about how there's just so much improvement in this. There was also discussion because one of the analysts asked a question, which has already been answered ages ago, about the fact that xAI got a whole bunch of H100s from NVIDIA where they were originally destined for Tesla. But Elon explained yet again, and very patiently, that Tesla couldn't use them at the time because they didn't have their Texas data center built out, and therefore they just sort of, switched. They gave those to xAI. I believe those might be the ones that are in Memphis now that they just turned on, but that the Texas data center, I guess, is actually getting racks and things like that in this week, and they will be building out and implementing their stuff very, very quickly. Elon also talked about, interestingly enough, hiring problems for Tesla, that some people only want to work for a startup, work for an artificial general intelligence startup, and refuse to work for Tesla, and therefore were offered employment at xAI instead of allowing them to go to some other startup. So it was a rather interesting little aspect of things that some of these players in the AI space, some of the potential employees, don't want to work for Tesla. They only want to work for a AGI, ASI type of company. So very interesting how all of that stuff plays out. It would be nice to be that much in demand that you can pick exactly where it is that you want to work. But anyway, all to the good. So anyway, let's see. They've made progress in FSD, the improvements in supervised full self-driving, including things like not having to wear sunglasses in 12.5 dot something. Apparently the original version of 12.5 doesn't have that yet, and it also does not have merging of the highway and city stacks. So both of those are coming in a near like 12.5 dot something release. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we will get both the sunglasses, like a little bit reduction in sunglasses, so you don't have to do hands on the steering wheel driving with sunglasses on, which is great because I just can't drive in the daytime without sunglasses. It just bugs me. Plus the fact they're prescriptions, so they actually help me see better, which is also a good thing. But then the other thing is the highway stack being on the new system, the 12 branch of things instead of the 11 branch. So one thing that is very important, and Elon talked about this, is most people don't know how good the system is, and Elon stressed full self-driving demos. So very important point, get people's butts in seats is really important. That was one of the aspects that I don't know if they're still doing this or not, but at the end of the quarter push last quarter, I know that Elon had made an edict that before you would let a person take delivery, they had to do a demo of full self-driving so that they would understand just how good it was. So Elon talked yet again about analysts who live in Boston and New York, for example, and don't even own cars and are talking about autonomous driving without having experienced it themselves. And when you experience it, it is a very, very different beast. If you haven't seen my video with Futurama King, you can definitely check it out up here. I'll leave it at the end of the video as well. I drove around Los Angeles in his car with 12.3.6. It was amazing. I mean, you know, it's great in Georgia too, but it's also amazing to see it work in another entire city. And they talked about later, I don't know if the transcript has this or not, I'll have to look, but they talked later about how the whole idea of this is a generalized solution. The whole point of full self-driving is that you could, Elon said you could make an Earth 2.0. In other words, you could manufacture another Earth with basically the same parameters, but with roads everywhere different and, you know, different things like that, and the car would be able to drive there. So in other words, you can take the car and drop it in a new city. Equivalent, they also talked about going to like Europe and other countries. Like you can go to other countries as a human being and with a little bit, you know, maybe you might be hesitant the first couple of days till you learned a couple of the tricks of the road, but you can drive in other countries even though you haven't driven in those countries before. Likewise, they're saying that they're discovering that full self-driving is able to do that as well because it's a generalized solution. It's global. It doesn't depend on local stuff, which really differentiates it from something like Waymo, like Google's Waymo. So again, if you haven't driven full self-driving, find a friend. If you live around the Atlanta area, I will be happy to take you myself. You will be really impressed, I promise you. We postponed the robotaxi unveil a couple of months, shifted to 10/10. I thought that was going to be the date they were going to pick. I figured if they weren't going to do 8/8, they'd do 10/10. So anyway, I guess I will hopefully be traveling to that on 10/10. If not, I will be reporting from home, not here, but anyway, I'll be doing it remotely. Wanted to make some important, Elon said, I wanted to make some important changes that will improve the main thing that we are going to show. Something about the front end and something like that. And he's also said that he's going to show some other things. So a lot of teasing, not a lot of actual information. I'm actually glad that it's been pushed back by a little bit because I need to get home and like readjust and reorient. Otherwise, I would have had to, if I had to travel, I would have had to travel immediately upon getting home. So that would have been crazy. By the way, don't forget about X Takeover. I'm going to be there in just a couple of days from now. So that's really cool. Anyway, storage business is growing faster than anything else. That's pretty cool. They are, that's battery storage, of course, not, not compute storage. They are supply constrained, not demand constrained in storage. Obviously, that is the case because they have years of backlog. They're looking to more than double battery storage output and super excited about the progress. Future is incredibly bright. And then he went back to autonomy. I just can't emphasize the importance of autonomy on the vehicle side and for Optimus. Tesla is producing in volume with unsupervised full self-driving will take the valuation to something much higher. Long-term, Optimus achieves a valuation of nearly $10 to $15 trillion. So that's what he's talking about. He even kind of started joking about the fact that he doesn't know exactly what money even means after you get, he said the number, not me, he said 20 billion Optimus around eventually, or humanoid robots, and that Tesla would take a significant chunk of that because they're uniquely positioned to build out these robots. And that at that point, what you call money doesn't even really make sense anymore. So anyway, so then we have CFO opening remarks. Tesla team rose to the occasion again. Automotive deliveries grew sequentially, which is really, really good. Not year over year, though, so that's important to remember. The auto business affordability remains top of mind for customers, and yes, that is absolutely the case. Lower selling price affected revenues in quarter 2 and will also affect quarter 3. This is the best time to buy a Tesla. It's always the best time to buy a Tesla. Record quarter on regulatory credits, so that's actually good. That helps bolster, their earnings and everything. That means that other companies are not producing enough EVs. They're having to pay Tesla for it, so that's the way it works. Working to localize supply chains at all gigafactories, they believe that 300-mile range and supercharger network expansion will help with range anxiety. So they're even tracking, I guess that's the basic model because the long-range models have over 300 miles, but that seems to be the mileage that people actually care about. And that makes sense. Cost per vehicle declined when you remove the cost of the Cybertruck, so that actually makes a big difference too. And the Cybertruck is a very new beast, so you don't really want to count that in terms of the ASP. We're still ramping Cybertruck and Model 3, but costs are headwind. So they're having troubles getting the cost down of both of those vehicles. Interesting that the new Model 3, the Highland, is also on the expensive end of things. So excited about Tesla Energy, Powerwall Megapack, recognition of storage, gigawatts depends on a few factors, service is another revenue grow. Impact of reorganization was 0.6 billion or 600 million, which we talked about before. They still expect $10 billion in capital expenditures for fiscal year 2024. If I recall, Elon was saying that most of that was going to be on AI, compute, things like that, and of course, employment as well. Excuse me. 1.3 billion positive cash flow, $30 billion in cash. So any other car company would be very, very happy to have that. Of course, Tesla is not a car company, but anybody else would would be very happy to have that. Then we get to the investor questions, which are always better than the analyst questions. Analysts, you guys need to do a better job because you ask the same questions over and over again. They're not that interesting. Listen to the investor questions. I think it's because, what does it say, where you have to upvote these and everything. So these tend to be the questions that people really want to get answers to. So they tend to be very, very good. All right, the status on the Roadster. Elon says they have completed the engineering, expect to be in production next year. So we will see. I mean, again, this is a very low priority for them, but I think they really want to have something that's just the ultimate smackdown where there's just no chance that anybody else, including high-end supercar companies, will be able to compete. I think it is important that Tesla does produce the Roadster because companies like BYD are starting to produce like supercars. So they really need to pay attention to that as well. Next question up was, when do you expect the next robotaxi ride, or I think the first robotaxi ride? When can you expect the first unsupervised FSD ride? And he said we should get miles between interventions to be high enough to implement unsupervised by the end of this year or 2025. That's a pretty big gap. So we could be looking at December of 2024 all the way through to December of 2025. But that's reasonable. I think that's a reasonable expectation. It doesn't seem to be too aggressive at this point, but both Elon and I have optimism biases. Anyway, Cybertruck being expanded to cyber vehicles, no comment. The interesting part about that was that there was sort of a this was where he talked about not wanting to Osborne themselves, but it sounded like they may have other things like cyber vans and stuff like that. So the no comment was a little bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. 4680 battery production. We currently produce 1,400 Cybertrucks per week, all using 4680 cells, which is great. We also now have a number of Cybertrucks per week. That is ramping quickly. They're going to be able to do dry cell for the 4680s, I think he said the end of 2024, maybe early 2025, and they will ramp that. That means that we should get better energy density and they should cost less money and be more competitive. Question on the Dojo supercomputer. This was really interesting. Elon says he's very impressed with NVIDIA's hardware, definitely. The demand for NVIDIA hardware is so high, this is the interesting part, that it's difficult to get GPUs, which he diverted to XAI, that we talked about that already. Dojo, Elon said, and he was very specific about this, he said, we need to be able to do this in order to have enough training capacity. It's not that they want to, it's, as he said, we have no choice but to double down on Dojo. So really interesting that they're like, this is a play. This is going to make them look like really, really smart people eventually if this works out the way that they're thinking it might, which is to have made a secondary bet on their own homegrown AI supercomputer. not just depend on NVIDIA, because everybody else is depending on NVIDIA, and it's very, very difficult to get those GPUs. So it's not like they're going to turn away NVIDIA. What he's saying is they're hoping that they're able to have a backup plan. They're able to have Dojo plus NVIDIA, not replace NVIDIA with Dojo. So just to be very, very clear about that. Optimus accessories was really, really fun. I did not put this down. This is in the transcript here. He just kind of laughed about accessories. But then he said, basically, he says anything that will work with a human being will work with Optimus, which is right. Clothing or watches or bracelets or whatever, or apparently some other items that you could have. So anyway, so next question was asked, do you feel like you're cheating people from enjoying Tesla by not advertising? Interesting, because Tesla has started advertising. We then get the CFO said that 2/3 of Tesla buyers are buying a Tesla for the first time, which is really interesting. I would not have expected that. That was specifically Q2, that 2/3 of Tesla buyers are new Tesla buyers. And I don't know if that was inside the US, outside the US, everywhere. I expect that's globally, but that's actually a really, really good number. It's great that you get repeat customers. But in order to grow your market, you have to get new customers. So getting 2/3 of customers being new is great. We have not exhausted all our options in terms of advertising and stuff. Next question, updated timeline for Giga Mexico. This was a little bit sad. Elon said that they are paused on Giga Mexico because they have to see what happens with the election, because one of the candidates says that there will be EV tariffs coming out of Mexico, in which case it would not make a lot of sense for them to put a lot of money into building in Mexico. So don't expect any news on Mexico or any kind of building or something like that until like late November, December, depending on the election, and then maybe never depending on the election. So anyway, that's really interesting. A question was also asked, is Tesla still in talks with OEMs to license full self-driving? Elon said there are a few. So previously he'd said there is one, but he said there are a few and they expect there will be more over time, and he would not, specify any more like about that. So, but that's interesting that we've gone from one to a few, and that means that the dominoes may be starting to fall. So last investor question, any updates on investing into XAI and using Grok in Tesla? And Elon said that they would need shareholder approval for such an investment. That makes perfect sense, but he did say that Grok has some real potential to be used in Tesla's entities. Think Optimus, think your car. At the very, very basic level, it could be something where it's a plug-in on top and you can talk to it, right? So it's something that's a language acquisition, and you just say, hey, Grok, what's the weather like today? And it's like, oh, it's sunny and 73 out or something like that. So that kind of a thing is the basic level, but there could also be a much deeper integration as well. But it doesn't sound like there has been a lot of that work that's been done yet. I was actually kind of hoping that there was something a little bit deeper in the cars at the very least, but anyway, he worked around that a little bit, so that might be true. But in terms of an actual investment in XAI, that would require a shareholder vote. I think that's very appropriate. Okay, so analyst questions, long question. Guys, shrink it down. Anyway, so this was the question that was asked about the H100. So, boring. We've already heard about that. They just didn't have any place to turn it on. But the interesting part here is that Giga Texas, the data center there, is almost ready. So, and in terms of regards to XAI and employment, this is where Elon talked about some people who only wanted to work on AGI and a startup, and they were not interested in working on Tesla-specific problems, so they could do an AI startups. And so they were basically like, well, we can either offer them employment at XAI and still have them, or we can let them go entirely. So that was when they cut and switched to XAI. So Elon said that they would first ask them about Tesla, and then if they were absolutely adamant about not Tesla, then they would actually move over to that. In other words, they were not going to come to Tesla under any circumstances, so there we go. And then, of course, we got the AI as a broad spectrum. We're focused on full self-driving and Optimus at Tesla, so you have to keep that in mind, which is very true. I mean, there's a huge spectrum of things being done in artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, perceptual artificial intelligence, all that kind of stuff. You have to remember that there's a lot of range. And so not everybody is going to work at Tesla. That's fine. And some of them could work at XAI. And ultimately, that will help Tesla because there will be some sort of synergy between these two companies. All right, should we expect more limited variants with some changes or improvements in terms of vehicles? Some variability in form factor, and Elon again said we don't get into future product announcements. Again, I don't understand why people keep asking that. He will not answer that during these earnings calls. If we affect some great things, it affects our short-term sales. Yep. So the next question is, when we think about revenue contribution, how do we think about the overall segments over the years? Will auto revenue drop below 50% of total sales? How will you let the users use the compute power of their cars? That was the part that I was interested in this question. So Elon says that everybody will want an Optimus robot. This is where I believe he said 20 billion of these things. So that's kind of crazy, right? So general purpose EVs, of course, that's going to be bigger than EVs. Optimus is the best humanoid robot. They're uniquely able to make Optimus because they have the brains, they have the brawn in the sense of being able to manufacture all the parts and everything, and they have the experience in building things out at massive scales. So they really, really do. And again, Elon is a big fan of ARK Invest because he called them out yet again. And he said that, you could lead to a market cap of $5 trillion. And then that's for the full self-driving autonomous driving. But then it could be several times that after we ship Optimus. And he said that's when we're headed for an age of abundance. And what does money even mean at that point? He didn't even know. None of us maybe know. So anyway, as far as distributed compute is concerned, that becomes interesting with AI 5 next generation, which should be available at the end of next year, so 2025, and scale production in 2026. So that is going to be hardware 5, but it's just going to be renamed to AI 5. And that should be able to, really be able to do a lot of compute while the car isn't driving, whether that's cryptocurrency mining or doing AI inference or whatever that is. That should be able to work really, really hard for owners and for fleet managers when the car's not actually driving. So that's pretty impressive. And I believe what he was saying here was there's nearly 100 hours of AI compute. Even if you're using the car as a robotaxi, there would still be 100 hours a week where the car would be sitting and charging or not being used or something like that. And that is a lot of compute time times the capacity of AI 5 to be able to do massive inference. So that's the kind of thing where you could do distributed inference, and it could be useful for general purpose computing. So next question was elaborate on full self-driving licensing. As expected, Elon demurred on that. So, if you had a cooperative agreement, would it take years to recognize that right? And then he said they would have to, the question was basically, would Tesla tell us who this person was once they had come to an agreement, or would they wait until the car was ready to ship? And Elon said that this is where he demurred. He was like, look, it just depends on what they want. So let's just say Ford, because Ford is certainly one of the ones in negotiations. Let's say that they come to an agreement, but Ford is like, we don't want to Osborne our cars, so we want to wait until we have a vehicle with the sensors on it and is ready to ship. And that might take 2 or 3 years. Tesla's going to be quiet about that. But if Ford said, no, we want to advertise it and tout the fact that we're going to have this full self-driving in a couple of years so that people are excited about our vehicles, Tesla would go either way. That's basically what it is. It just depends on them. And then skipping down a little bit, there was a question about robotaxi strategy. Can you help us understand which regulations are the ones we should be looking for? To what extent does the strategy shift to nationwide? Is it more geofence? Elon said our solution is a generalized solution. This is where he talked about like an Earth 2.0, that you could just make another Earth and drop the car in there. He said that the whole idea is to make full self-driving materially safer than human drivers, at which point you show the regulators the data. And he said there is no regulator that he's met that won't believe the data. If you show them the data, then they will allow approval of the vehicle to drive. And, that's basically what he says here. Makes it harder for regulators to deny. And he said, I don't think regulatory risk will be a driving factor of whether they delay or, produce or get full self-driving into place whenever they do. So that's not going to be the critical slowing factor. So that's actually, pretty interesting. And he said pretty soon we will ask for regulatory approval for supervised FSD in Europe, China, and other countries. And they were unlikely to receive that before the end of the year. But that is really, really cool that we're looking at the other major markets, which is Europe and China, and then of course other countries as well. But if they can do it in the US and Canada and North America, in Europe, or at least most of the countries in Europe and in China. They're going to cover most of the significant markets in the world. And then, of course, they can add the other countries as they need to. So this is all amazing news in terms of the ability of Tesla to weather a lot of storms. Certainly their car sales have been a little depressed recently, but they're very much focused on AI at this point. They're very much focused on energy and everything at this point, energy storage and generation, of course, as well. Although they don't talk about solar too much, it doesn't sound like solar is doing fantastic against specifically the Chinese. But anyway, they talk a lot about battery storage, which is absolutely necessary with both personal solar panels on somebody's roof, but also these mega pack structures where they've got massive solar farms or wind farms or something, and they have to store energy for use when the sun is down or the wind is not up. So that covers the midterm. That's going to allow Tesla to weather the storm of their vehicle sales being a little bit variable and being depressed and everything. In the long term, full self-driving autonomously, a car being able to drive itself around is going to be huge. The Cybercab will be huge on 1010 now instead of 8.8. So that will be a really, really big announcement. And then the last piece of the puzzle, of course, in the long term is Optimus, that's going to make everything else look tiny. Elon said it would be staggering and that we would have this age of abundance coming. So that's all excellent news. I, of course, am very much looking forward to 1010, but in the meantime, I'm going to be at X Takeover this weekend, and I'm also going to be in Vancouver in September for the Fully Charged show. So look for me both of those places if you're able to, and we will talk then. In the meantime, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.